What happens when Hollywood's most notoriously private actor finally loses his cool on live television? Well, you're about to find out, because Harrison Ford's explosive confrontation with Whoopi Goldberg on The View became the most talked-about daytime television moment in years. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think really pushed Ford over the edge. Trust me, you won't see this coming. It was supposed to be a routine promotional appearance. Harrison Ford, promoting his latest project, had reluctantly agreed to appear on The View, something his publicist had been pushing for months. The legendary actor, known for his Han Solo and Indiana Jones roles, had always been uncomfortable with talk shows, preferring to let his work speak for itself. But Hollywood had changed, and even the biggest stars needed to play the publicity game. As Ford walked onto the familiar set, the audience erupted in applause. Joy Behar flashed her trademark grin. Sunani host adjusted her notes with professional precision. Sarah Haynes beamed with genuine excitement, and Alyssa Farah Griffin sat ready with her political insights. But it was Whoopi Goldberg sitting in her center chair as moderator who seemed to have a different energy that morning. Harrison Ford. "Everybody," Whoopi announced as the applause died down. "Thanks for joining us, Harrison. I have to say it's about time you came on our show." Ford settled into his chair, his famously gruff demeanor already apparent. "Well, Whoopi, let's just say my publicist is very persistent." The audience chuckled, but Whoopi's smile seemed forced. "Speaking of persistence, I've been wanting to ask you about something for years now. You've made a career playing these tough guy heroes, but in real life, you've been pretty quiet about a lot of important issues. Some might say you've been hiding behind your characters." The temperature in the studio seemed to drop a few degrees. Ford's jaw tightened slightly, but his voice remained steady. "I wouldn't say I've been hiding, Whoopi. I just believe there's a difference between being an actor and being an activist. I try to keep those worlds separate." Joy Behar jumped in, sensing the tension. "But Harrison, don't you think celebrities have a responsibility to use their platform? I mean, you have millions of fans who look up to you." "Look," Ford replied, his famous finger-pointing gesture starting to emerge. "I've never claimed to be anyone's role model. I play pretend for a living. If people want political commentary, they should listen to politicians, not actors." Whoopi leaned forward, her voice taking on an edge. "That's interesting coming from someone who's made millions playing American heroes. Captain America fights for justice. Indiana Jones fights Nazis. Han Solo fights the Empire. But Harrison Ford fights for what exactly?" The audience grew quiet, sensing this wasn't going according to the usual talk show script. Sarah Haynes tried to lighten the mood. "Well, I think Harrison has always been pretty clear about his environmental activism. You've been a pilot for conservation efforts, right?" Ford nodded gratefully toward Sarah. "That's right. I've been involved with Conservation International for decades. I believe in protecting our planet, not lecturing people about how they should vote." But Whoopi wasn't backing down. "See, that's exactly what I'm talking about. You'll fight for trees, but when it comes to fighting for people, for civil rights, for social justice, where's that same passion? It's easy to be an environmentalist when it doesn't cost you anything politically." Ford's knuckles whitened. He gripped the arms of his chair. "Excuse me, are you suggesting that my environmental work doesn't matter? That protecting the planet for future generations isn't important enough for you?" "I'm saying we'll be shot back, that it's convenient activism. Real activism means taking stands that might hurt your box office numbers. It means speaking truth to power even when it's uncomfortable." Sunani host, usually the voice of reason, tried to redirect. "I think what Whoopi might be getting at is that in times of crisis, people look to public figures for leadership. And with your influence, Harrison, even a small statement can have a big impact." Ford turned to face Sunny directly. "And who decides what that statement should be?" "You, the media, Twitter. I've seen what happens to actors who speak out. They get attacked from all sides. Their words get twisted, and suddenly they're not actors anymore. They're political targets." Alyssa Farah Griffin, drawing on her political background, nodded sympathetically. "That's actually a fair point. The political climate has become so toxic that celebrities often can't win no matter what they say." But Whoopi was relentless. "So your solution is to say nothing? To just collect your paychecks and stay silent while the world burns around you? That's not heroic, Harrison. That's cowardice." The word hung in the air like a challenge. Ford's famous temper, the one that had clashed with directors and co-stars throughout his career, began to surface. His voice dropped to that dangerous whisper that fans recognized from his most intense movie moments. Cowardice, he repeated slowly. Let me tell you something about cowardice, Whoopi. Cowardice is attacking someone for not conforming to your political views. Cowardice is using your platform to bully guests into saying what you want them to say. The audience was completely silent now. This was unlike anything they'd seen on daytime television. Joy Behar looked nervously between the two while Sarah Haynes seemed frozen in her chair. Whoopi's eyes flashed. Bully, I'm asking legitimate questions that any journalist would ask. If you can't handle basic scrutiny about your public positions, maybe you shouldn't be in the public eye. Ford stood up slightly in his chair, his voice rising. Basic scrutiny. You've been attacking me from the moment I sat down. This isn't journalism. This is an ambush. And for what? Because I won't parrot whatever political talking points you want me to endorse. I want you to show some backbone. Whoopi fired back. I want you to act like the heroes you play on screen, but instead you hide behind this. I'm just an actor nonsense while the world falls apart. The other hosts were now looking desperately at their producers off camera, but Ford was past the point of caring about television protocols. His decades of frustration with media pressure and political expectations were boiling over. You want to talk about backbone. Ford's voice was now carrying that trademark edge that had made him famous in confrontational movie scenes. I've been flying rescue missions for lost hikers when I'm not making movies. I've spent my own money protecting forests that your grandchildren will inherit. I've kept my mouth shut when other actors were grandstanding because I believe in doing the work, not taking credit for it. Whoopi wasn't impressed, and I'm sure that plays well with your accountant. But where's your voice when people are suffering? When democracy is under attack, when basic human rights are being threatened? Ford's patience finally snapped completely. He leaned forward, his voice now carrying the full weight of his anger. You know what your problem is, Whoopi. Ford's voice cut through the studio like a blade. You think everyone has to fight your fights the way you want them fought. You think if someone doesn't perform activism the way you approve of, they're not doing enough. Well, here's a news flash for you. I don't answer to you or anyone else about how I choose to make a difference. Whoopi's face hardened. And here's a news flash for you, Harrison. Your privilege is showing. It's easy to stay neutral when none of these issues actually affect your daily life. You can afford to be above it all because you're a rich white man in Hollywood. The audience gasped audibly. Even by the View's standards of heated debate, this was escalating beyond anything they'd witnessed. Joy Behar's eyes widened as she realized they were watching a complete meltdown in real time. Ford's voice dropped to that dangerous whisper again. My privilege. Let me tell you about privilege. Whoopi, privilege is having a television platform where you can attack people daily and call it journalism. Privilege is deciding that your way of thinking is the only acceptable way and anyone who disagrees is automatically wrong. That's rich coming from someone who's made a fortune playing working-class heroes while living in mansions. Whoopi shot back. At least I use my platform to fight for something meaningful instead of just cashing checks and staying silent. Sarah Haynes finally found her voice, trying desperately to pull them back from the brink. Guys, maybe we should take a step back here. I think we're all on the same side when it comes to wanting to make the world better. But Ford was beyond diplomatic solutions now. No, Sarah, we're not all on the same side because apparently if you don't perform your beliefs the way Whoopi demands, you're not good enough. If you don't tweet the right hashtags or show up to the right rallies, you're a coward. Sunani host jumped in, her legal background kicking in as she tried to find middle ground. Harrison, I think what Whoopi is trying to say is that silence can be interpreted as complicity, especially when you have influence. Ford whirled to face Sunny complicity. Are you serious right now? I've quietly donated millions to causes I believe in. I've used my aviation skills to help with rescue operations and conservation efforts. I've supported countless charities without holding press conferences about it. But because I don't make political speeches, I'm complicit. Alyssa Farah Griffin, sensing the conversation spiraling completely out of control, tried to inject some political perspective. I think there's validity to both viewpoints here. Some people prefer private activism while others believe in using their platform more publicly. But Whoopi was relentless. Private activism is a luxury that comes with privilege. Alyssa, when people's lives are on the line, when democracy is under attack, silence isn't noble, it's selfish. Ford's famous temper finally exploded. Selfish? You want to talk about selfish? How about making every conversation about your political agenda? How about ambushing guests who come here to talk about their work? How about turning a morning talk show into your personal political soapbox? This is my show. Whoopi fired back, her voice rising to match his intensity, and I'll ask whatever questions I think are important. If you can't handle being challenged, maybe you should stick to scripted interviews where everyone tells you how wonderful you are. The other hosts were now completely out of their depth. Joy Behar looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair, while Sarah Haynes was frantically signaling to producers off camera. Ford stood up from his chair, his full height making him an imposing presence on the set. You know what, Whoopi? You're absolutely right. This is your show and you can run it however you want. But I don't have to sit here and be lectured by someone who thinks activism is just shouting at people who disagree with you. Sit down, Harrison, Whoopi commanded, but there was a tremor in her voice now. She was realizing this had gone too far, but her pride wouldn't let her back down. No, I won't sit down, Ford replied, his voice carrying that authoritative tone that had commanded starships and led expeditions in his movies. I came here as a courtesy to promote my work, not to be interrogated about my political beliefs by someone who's never risked anything for the causes she claims to care about. Whoopi's face flushed with anger. Never risked anything. I've been fighting for civil rights and social justice since before you were famous. I've put my career on the line for what I believe in, and that's your choice, Ford shot back. Just like staying out of political grandstanding is mine. But the difference between us is that I don't attack other people for making different choices than I do. Sunani host made one last attempt at mediation. Harrison, I think we all respect your right to handle your activism privately, but surely you can understand why people might want to hear from influential figures during difficult times. Ford turned to Sunny, his voice softening slightly because she'd remained respectful throughout the confrontation. Sunny, I do understand that. But what I don't understand is why my way of contributing has to be invalidated because it doesn't look like what Whoopi wants it to look like. But Whoopi wasn't finished. Because your way of contributing is invisible, Harrison. It might make you feel good about yourself, but it doesn't inspire anyone else to action. It doesn't challenge the status quo. Ford's eyes blazed. My contribution doesn't have to be visible to be valid. I don't need applause for doing what I think is right. And I sure as hell don't need approval from someone who thinks the only way to fight for justice is to attack people on television. Nobody's attacking you, Whoopi protested, but even she seemed to realize how hollow that sounded given what had just transpired. Ford let out a bitter laugh. Really? Then what would you call the last 10 minutes? A friendly conversation. You've questioned my character, my courage, my integrity, and my commitment to making the world better. All because I won't be your political puppet. Joy Behar finally found the courage to speak up. Maybe we should take a commercial break and let everyone cool down. But Ford was already moving toward the edge of the set. No need for a commercial break, Joy. I think I've heard enough, and I think your audience has seen enough of what passes for journalism on this show. Whoopi's voice cracked slightly as she realized she was losing control of the situation entirely. Harrison, you're overreacting. We asked tough questions of all our guests. Ford stopped and turned back to face her one final time. Tough questions. Is that what you call this? Let me ask you a tough question, Whoopi. When did you decide that bullying people into conforming to your worldview became more important than having an actual conversation? The studio fell into complete silence. Even the cameras seemed to stop moving as everyone waited to see how this would end. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before Whoopi found her voice again, but it came out smaller than before, lacking the confidence she'd shown moments earlier. I'm not bullying anyone, Harrison. I'm holding you accountable. Ford's laugh was sharp and humorless. Accountable to who? To you. When did you become the arbiter of how celebrities should behave? When did your approval become the standard by which everyone else's contributions are measured? Alyssa Farah Griffin made one final attempt to salvage the situation. I think maybe we're all talking past each other here. Everyone processes current events differently, and that's okay. But Ford was past the point of diplomatic resolution. No, Alyssa, it's not okay. Not when someone uses their platform to shame and attack people for not performing activism the way they demand. This isn't about current events. This is about control. Whoopi's eyes flashed with renewed anger. Control. You think I'm trying to control you. I'm trying to wake you up. I'm trying to get you to use your influence for something that matters instead of just making movies and flying around in your planes. And there it is, Ford said, his voice carrying a tone of grim satisfaction. You just admitted it. You think my work doesn't matter. You think entertaining people, inspiring them with stories of heroism and adventure, bringing families together in movie theaters, none of that matters to you unless it comes with a political message you approve of. Sarah Haynes looked desperately uncomfortable. Harrison, I don't think that's what Whoopi meant. Actually, Sarah, I think that's exactly what she meant. Ford replied, his gaze never leaving Whoopi's face. And you know what? That tells me everything I need to know about the kind of person I'm dealing with here. Whoopi stood up from her chair now, matching Ford's confrontational posture. The kind of person you're dealing with. What's that supposed to mean? Ford stepped closer to the moderator's chair, his presence commanding the entire studio. It means I'm dealing with someone who's so convinced of their own righteousness that they can't see past their own ego. Someone who's forgotten that there are many ways to make a positive impact in the world. Don't you dare lecture me about making an impact. Whoopi shot back, her voice rising. I've been fighting battles you've never even thought about. And I respect that, Ford said, his voice suddenly calm again, which somehow made his words even more cutting. But what I don't respect is someone who thinks their battles are the only ones worth fighting. Who thinks their way of fighting is the only valid way. Joy Behar finally found her voice again, though it was shaky. Maybe we should agree to disagree and move on to lighter topics. Ford turned to Joy with something that might have been pity in his eyes. Joy, there are no lighter topics when you're sitting next to someone who's determined to turn every conversation into a political interrogation. This was supposed to be about my new project. Remember, Sunny Host made one last professional attempt. We would still love to hear about your new work, Harrison, would you? Ford asked, genuine curiosity in his voice as he looked at each host in turn. Or would every question be designed to trap me into making some political statement? Would every answer I give be dissected for hidden meanings or criticized for not going far enough? The question hung in the air, and the uncomfortable silence that followed was answer enough that Whoopi's voice came out as almost a whisper, but it carried clearly in the dead, quiet studio. If you can't handle questions about your public positions, maybe you shouldn't be promoting anything publicly. Ford stared at her for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of decades of frustration with exactly this kind of media manipulation. You know what, Whoopi? You're absolutely right again. If this is what passes for promotion these days, if this is what guests can expect when they come on your show, then maybe I shouldn't be here. He began removing his microphone, his movements deliberate and final. I came here to talk about my work, to connect with fans, to maybe bring a little joy to people's morning. But apparently that's not enough for you. Apparently, everything has to be a political statement or it's worthless. Nobody said your work is worthless, Sarah protested weakly. Ford paused in removing his mic to look at her. Didn't she though, Sarah? When she said I was hiding behind my characters. When she called me a coward for not using my platform the way she thinks I should. When she suggested that entertaining people isn't a real contribution to society. Whoopi's voice cracked slightly. I never said entertaining people doesn't matter. You didn't have to say it directly, Ford replied, finally freeing himself from the microphone equipment. It was clear from every question, every accusation, every disappointed look. You've decided that unless someone is fighting your specific fights in your specific way, they're not doing enough. He straightened his jacket and looked directly into the main camera, addressing the audience for the first time since the confrontation began. I want to apologize to anyone who tuned in expecting to hear about movies and ended up watching this circus instead. You deserve better than having your morning entertainment turned into a political ambush. Whoopi found her voice again, stronger now, but with an edge of desperation. Harrison, you're being dramatic. This is how interviews work in the real world. Ford turned back to her one final time, and his smile was colder than any villain he'd ever faced on screen. No, Whoopi. This is how interviews work in your world. A world where everyone has to conform to your ideology or be attacked. A world where different opinions aren't just wrong, they're moral failures. You began walking toward the edge of the set, but Whoopi wasn't finished. So, you're just going to run away. Walk off the set because someone asked you tough questions. Ford stopped, his back still to the panel, and when he spoke, his voice carried across the studio with perfect clarity. I'm not running away from tough questions, Whoopi. I'm walking away from someone who thinks bullying is the same thing as journalism. There's a difference. He turned back one last time and his final words were delivered with the same intensity he brought to his most memorable movie moments. You want to know what real courage looks like? It's not attacking people who can't fight back on television. It's admitting when you're wrong. It's respecting that people can disagree with you and still be good people. It's understanding that your way isn't the only way. With that, Harrison Ford walked off the View set, leaving behind a panel of stunned hosts and an audience that had just witnessed daytime television history. Whoopi sat back down in her chair, her face flushed, clearly struggling to regain control of her show. Joy Behar cleared her throat nervously. Well, that was unexpected. Sarah Haynes looked like she was fighting back tears. I really wish that had gone differently. Sunny host, ever the professional, tried to restore some dignity to the proceedings. We'll be right back after this commercial break. But as the cameras cut away, it was clear that something fundamental had shifted. The audience sat in stunned silence, processing what they'd just witnessed. Whoopi stared at the spot where Ford had been sitting, perhaps realizing for the first time that her aggressive tactics had finally met someone who wouldn't be intimidated. The aftermath would be discussed for weeks, analyzed by media critics and social commentators alike. But in that moment, as the studio lights dimmed for the commercial break, everyone present knew they had just witnessed something unprecedented. A moment when Hollywood's most famously private star had finally said exactly what he thought about the current state of celebrity culture and media manipulation. So, what do you think? Did Harrison Ford have the right to walk off, or should he have stayed and continued the debate? Let me know in the comments below. Who do you think was right in this argument? Comment below.